Welcome to Sea Level Up. I'm JD Miller.
And I'm Mike Kreissl.
First of all, you may not even know who the heck we are. We're going to get to that here in a second. But what is Sea Level Up? Well, to start off, we got to start with the origins. And really, that's what this is all about, isn't it, Mike?
It is about the origins. So the origin of this started, I don't know when and I don't know how, but many months ago, JD convinced me that we should be doing a podcast. And you know what? I'm so glad he did because we're finally doing it. We're finally doing it. And I have to tell you, it's changed my life. It has completely changed my life. I'm more productive than I've ever been. I fold laundry faster. I'm eating less cheese, going to bed early, waking up late, completing all my tasks. I feel like a real go-getter now. And I just have one question for you,
Yeah.
JD Miller. Can you
Okay.
tell me, what is this podcast about?
I tell you, this podcast is about having a lot of fun, for one. But everybody does have an origin story. And when you look at leaders out there, and I don't care if you're a leader as a CIO, a CEO, a musician, a restaurateur, uh, quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, you're a leader, right? And how did you get there? You had to start somewhere. And what were your influences and what advice would you give to people who want to be a leader in whatever profession they choose? We're going to tackle that here on Sea Level Up. And you weren't wrong, Mike. It was we had a few I'd like to say glasses, but we'll go with bottles of wine. And like, we should do this. I think this is something people would want to hear. And I think we're right. We'll find out, right? We'll find out. We've got some great guests lined up as we're going to drop this every Tuesday. But if you don't know who we are, I'm JD Miller, longtime podcaster, over 600 episodes, former TV sports anchor for CBS, NBC, and Fox. I got some great stories we'll talk about over the weeks to come about that. But hosted and ran a ton of events, and founder and CEO of James Dwayne Group.
And I'm Mike Kreissl. I'm the general sales manager for Cream Wine Company and imports in Chicago, Illinois. And I have experience in sketch comedy. I trained at Second City, the National Theater Institute, prior to all of that. And we are here to learn the origin of how things start, how people struggle, how they get over it, and how they actually find success and happiness, not only in business, but personally too.
I do have to ask, being in that wine business, how
Mm.
often a day do you hear about the Catalina wine mixer?
The Catalina wine mixer, I don't hear so much about that, but people are really excited about White Claw. Loving the White Claw. Loving the
It's
White Claw.
it's the white Zin of this generation.
Exactly.
Well, this is going to be a fantastic show. Thank you all for joining us on this ride. We're going to have a blast, and we're going to start off with a great guy. Pete Grimes is the author of a book called Sea Level Author. I'm not going to lie, I average about a book every other year. I read this one on my 50th birthday, and it was fantastic. And it inspired me to say, hey, I've got a story to tell as well. And how do I do it, though? Pete Grimes is going to tell us, marketer extraordinaire, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. So when we come back, Mike, let's start our first episode with Pete Grimes.
Sounds good. And JD will read another book in 50 years.
A veteran marketer with stints as the head of marketing at organizations such as Oracle, Datamine, Samsung, Nokia, IQPC, and more. He's the founder of Legacy Thought Leaders and Legacy Keepers, best-selling author of Sea Level Author. I've shared the stage with this guy many times, and he loves a microphone as much as I do. Welcome, Pete Grimes.
Thank you, JD. That's funny. We ran away to the circus, didn't we? We were on stage touring for a while, and in a given week, we could be in New York, Chicago, Canada, California, and I still have the knots in my back from American Airlines to prove it. So yeah, that was fun though. Love that. And I'm happy to be here with you guys today too, JD, Mike.
Yeah, interesting, Pete, because we would be on stage and I felt like we were rock stars. And this is why. because we would be on stage, and then it was almost like I had to have a note, what city am I in? It's like, it's great to be here in Toronto. So
Thankfully,
it was
neither
one
one
of
of us ever did that like really big faux pas. Like, thank you, Denver. Wait, you're not in Denver today. You're in Detroit. Close.
Well, I had my big 50th birthday recently, and I was on a beach, and I'm not a huge reader, but I read Sea Level Author and was so inspired, very excited for you in that book, Pete. To start off with, what inspired that book for you?
That was funny. Well, actually, thank you for reading it. So you're that guy who bought the book. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So, yeah, it's really two stages. One was a friend just calling me out, as only a good friend could do, giving you that kick in the pants that you need. Two, something special we did for my dad years back with a group called Story Corps. And lastly, just it needed to be done, and I'll explain what that means. So we had interviewed my dad for Story Corps. Story Corps is an amazing organization. They're doing historical archives, audio archives of everyone in the country. And we did that with my dad. It was a really interesting interview process. And then we started dealing with the problems of the format. Like, well, now we have it on CDs, and of course, nobody has CDs any longer. What are we going to do? So I got it transcribed, turned it into a book, and my dad's a voracious reader. So suddenly, this man who's had so many books on his shelves, he finally had a book of his own. So that was great. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, I was really excited. And then, but the anecdote story was at a different event. It was before I met you, JD. I was doing an event, and and it was, I single-handedly robbed an executive of his moment of pleasure and fame and enjoyment, because he just done a presentation. We're sharing the stage, and he walked off, and I really wanted to help him. And I said, "Fantastic, that was great. You should do this, as a future." And it's far from it being comfort to him. I watched his shoulders shrug, and I was like, "What's going on?" He goes, "Yeah, I just still trying to figure out. This is a C-level executive, mind you. What's next? What do I do next?" And I realized that that's a question that we're hearing a lot, right, JD? It's like, after this, these are C-level executives. They've reached that hierarchy of needs that Maslow talks about, and they're saying, "What's next? How do they give back?" If you're not one of these guys at 65 who's willing to retire and knock a little white ball around the field somewhere, you're going to want to give back somehow. So this guy stumbled away, depressed. I don't know whether he went to the bar or to the reflecting or the pool or whatever. And then I realized at that time that as a marketing executive, that I did have a way to help him. And that was when this idea of legacy thought leaders came to light, and my book idea came to light, because there's a way that you could get your message out with a book in a simple, easy way, which I'll explain about, I'm sure, in this interview. Make it super easy, overcoming all the things about time, writer's block, all the imposter syndrome, all these big obstacles for people who don't want to write their books, and do it in a fun and easy way. And so that was the idea I had. And then when my friends asked me, "Have you ever written a book?" Now that you're trying to promote everybody, promote this idea that everybody has a book and then everybody has a message in them. And I had not. So long story short, JD, that was when I decided to go ahead and write the book. So, so I'd have a leg to stand on.
So Pete, I have a question. There was a chapter in your book that talked about creating your own Sistine Chapel. And that really kind of stuck with me. I'm certainly no Michelangelo, and I don't pretend to be, or Da Vinci, or Papa John for that matter. So how does someone like me that has no experience writing a book all of a sudden jump in and say, "Well, I can do this now"?
Right. Okay, good. Yeah. That was that, just the backstory on that is like your Sistine Chapel. It's like, that's your masterpiece. That's your David, that's your Purple Rain, whatever you want to call it. That's your masterpiece. And And it's your impact. As an executive, as you, Mike, you have a lot of experience. You're sharing that before. You do have a message. You do have a story. There's somebody else whose life can be improved by that, giving them kind of a roadmap, shortcut to the success that you've had, the experiences that you've had. And so that's how your impact will be your masterpiece. Now, to give you an idea, this is a big reveal, JD, that I have a co-author to this book. It's Mojo the Labrador. I was house sitting for my brother, and I had this idea to write the book. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start out the morning with a pot of coffee in the pool with Mojo. And I just had a super hot outline, which is really the secret to answer your question, Mike. Have a really good outline, and we could talk about what that entails in a second. But just record yourself. So by recording yourself, we all are comfortable talking, not so much typing. So this overcomes that white page syndrome, writer's block. Like, how do I even get it off the ground? So I poured a pot of coffee, poured a glass of coffee. I had a lot of coffee actually that day. Hung out in the pool, taking a swim, playing with Mojo, recording the story through this, and moved from coffee to beers. So started drinking beers. Towards the middle of the afternoon, I switched to tequila because I was a little full from the beer. So Mojo and I finished a bottle of tequila. I'm just kidding. It was me, not him. And then my transcript was done. So I sent all that audio away to get transcribed, and I had my rough draft of the masterpiece with the help of my co-author, Mojo, the Labrador Retriever. So you could do the same thing, Mike. Yeah.
We'll be back after the break. Feeling tired, but tired of coffee? Spazzo is a new caffeine-heavy energy drink with all your favorite flavors, brought to you by the same people that made Klutz athletic wear. Spazzo has minerals, antioxidants, oxidants, and even some vitamins your body may need. While coffee wears off by lunchtime, Spazzo goes on and on and on. Also, 3 out of 10 doctors recommend Spazzo as a small part of a healthy diet. So drop that tired coffee and get erratic with Spazzo today. And we're back. Everyone has a story. We hear that was, kind of the old Edward R. Murrow, line. Everybody's got a story. Do you feel every executive has a story?
Yeah, and the problem is, I do, in fact, JD, and there's something else that I'm working on too, is that, and I'll talk about that, is that I have 2 different programs and ideas that, I have a done-for-you service with the C-level executives because they just don't have the time. Interview them, and I take care of the rest. Once I have the interview, the transcript, take care of the rest, get it published, get it in Amazon. There's some ninja tricks there where they only allow you on the surface to pick 2 different groupings where your book will be categorized. But there's a ninja trick where you can get 10 different groupings, category options. So I was actually a bestseller in 7 out of 10, which is amazing. So sorry, that's a humble brag there. But yeah, so when you think about it, and this is something I talk to C-level executives about a lot, they have this idea that their message won't resonate. And so part of what I'm doing is giving them a quick start guide for the busy executive to write their book. Do this exercise where you imagine a conversation with someone on your team. They've done it 100 times. They have leadership skills. They have their team grow. Because a lot of times they say the measurement of a good leader is not so much all the accolades you get, but seeing people on your team go on to become the leaders, right? And so that's the measurement of a good leader many times. And just imagine that conversation with someone on your team and how the good advice you've had for them. And then if you want to take it a step further, call someone from your team and say, hey, I'm thinking about creating a playbook which would fast track your career, your career. So where do you want to be? Would you be interested in that? And 9 times out of 10, this person's going to say, heck yeah, I want to fast track my career. Where do we start? So have the conversation with them. And so in these 2 simple exercises, you could start getting content for your book. And that's, and to answer your question, JD, all executives have a message to share. All of them have a valuable story to share, because even if it affects one person's life, one person on their team, it'd probably be worth it for most of them. And if you could leverage your book to affect the whole company, your whole organization, or around people around the world, even better.
Pete, something else from your book that stuck out to me was how Hemingway really influenced you.
Yeah.
And, I think as a creative writer, when I used to write sketch comedy, how I would get writer's block sometimes. But speaking of Hemingway, you said that you did the Running of the Bulls in Pamplona. And you also said that you did it multiple times. Why would you do it multiple times?
That's funny. I also did some skydiving, and they had the opportunity to do that a second time, and I had yet to do that. So the once was enough in terms of jumping out of a fully functional plane, as my dad said. Who does that anyway? This is going to make me sound terrible. And when I got to Pamplona, I promised myself I wouldn't be drinking the night before. But there's just so much energy in the streets that that did not happen. So yeah, I was not 100% the next day when I ran, but it was amazing. I bring up that story about Hemingway because in the book, I talk about how Hemingway is your obstacle, because people have this image of this struggling author, and that drinking himself, his liver to death and becoming suicidal and all these things, and trying to create that next great American novel. I love Hemingway, great stories, but the man was troubled, right? That's no mystery. And so I tell people that that's your obstacle, because you have this, romanticized image of this writer in Paris struggling and drinking and getting into fights and becoming suicidal, that there's no reason to do that. You could speak your book into existence, I mentioned before. And so forget this idea of Hemingway becoming solitary. Have your kid ask you questions from your outline, make it a team effort. It doesn't have to be lonely. I calculated that it's about 4 or 6 hours of interviewing, to get like a 200-page book. So if you imagine that, it could be broken up into 2 slots over a weekend. So you could quite literally have your transcript done over a weekend. Contrary to my dear departed hero Hemingway, who struggled for a long time to do that. And but yeah, so Running the Bulls was amazing. Hemingway was amazing, and that's the backstory there.
Yeah, and I've drank at Sloppy Joe's in Key West, where Hemingway drowned his sorrows. It's a dive, but
and JD, that's a great point. That's probably more dangerous being drinking in Key West than running with the Bulls in Pamplona sometimes.
Well, it kind of brings my next question for you, Pete, because when you're young, you're willing to try anything. The older we get, like the three of us, some imposter syndrome may come into play there, and you touched on that a little bit earlier when you were talking about writing this book. How do we avoid imposter syndrome as executives?
Right. And that's a great question. One of the ways is to go through those exercises I talked about before, that, making sure you have a valuable message. I think asking someone on your team, would they like to see a playbook from you to accelerate their career, and seeing that emphatic yes, heck yes, I don't want to know that. That's going to keep you going. Or as Simon Sinek says, understanding your why, right? And so, that is picturing someone on your team, someone more junior to you, helping them elevate their career, helping them avoid some of the obstacles you've faced or overcoming them, figuring out some of the tricks of the trade that you discovered ahead of time. Those type of things are going to help you get through this, overcoming imposter syndrome, where you really realize that your message is valuable. And just reflecting, as I mentioned before, on how many times people have come to you for advice. Right. And so if that dozen people in your life that have come to you for advice have walked away happy, imagine being able to expand your impact with a book. And so C-level author, I call it 3 steps to legacy thought leadership. Become an author. It's the easiest way to become an author. Expand your impact and strengthen your legacy, because the legacy part's really important. I think people talk about influencers who are really focused on vanity statistics and their product placements, the thought leaders that are going from hotel ballroom to ballroom and opening up their PowerPoint and speaking at the audience and with them. Legacy thought leaders, the way I defined it, are what people who want to make more of a long-term impact, like changing lives. And then when they change the lives of those people, it creates a ripple effect, because those people are going to go on and hopefully pay it forward as well and change the lives of others. And so that's kind of what keeps me motivated, trying to create that ripple effect for people and those executives who are standing in the sidelines thinking that they don't have a book in them or they can't do it, to say, hey, speak your book into existence. There's no, there's not the problem with time. There's no imposter syndrome. There's no writer's block. And you really don't need to become a writer to become an author. You just really need a message, right? And so that's the key. There are people who are very polished writers, but maybe they haven't run with the bulls in Pamplona and they don't have really a message to share, or they haven't exceeded in their current roles. So their message is, may not impact as many people. So sometimes the message is stronger than the skill set to writing. And so those are some of the things I'd like to talk about and share with these executives, so they do get off the sidelines and they do share their message. Because one thing is true too, that, as I mentioned before, we're living longer. What happens after your career? What happens after corporate America, as we talk about, kicks you to the curb? What's next for you? And so that question about what's next is really important.
I love that you were talking about the ripple effect, because it immediately makes me think of a coaching tree, like someone like Bill Parcells, for example, who has had so many wonderful coaches that have learned from him, that have gone on to become successful head coaches, Super Bowl winning head coaches. Also, you were kind of talking about the three things, the rule of three, and you're trilingual. You speak three languages, which is very impressive. I think you're kind of showing off when you get to the third one, but it is very impressive. So are you going to become quadrilingual at some point? Is there an aspiration to learn one more language here?
The language of love. No, I think that that third language was kind of accidental, honestly. I was working for a large multinational corporation, Samsung at the time, and if we can't say that, you could just edit that. I don't know, but and it was, there was another economic crisis. They eliminated the whole, marketing department all at once. I was one of those people, and I was sitting in my apartment in Miami, thinking that, what am I going to do? I just gotten my MBA degree. I thought the phones were going to be ringing off the hook, and that was not the case, and I thought, I got to lower my overhead. Thought about moving to somewhere in the Midwest, really inexpensive there, but I realized I could kill two birds with one stone, move to Brazil, paid $400 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment, and learned Portuguese and kite surfing at the time. So I was really happy about that. So that's how I learned my third language accidentally. Actually, it was more survival than anything else, Mike.
And the kite surfing is really interesting. This is something that you do quite often. Is it something that you had any experience doing before? Were you someone that surfed to begin with, or did you enjoy kites as a kid? What brought you into it?
Yeah, it's no, the answer is no. The short answer is no. And I think that it's just one of those sports that you have to be prepared to learn from the school of hard knocks, blood, sweat, and tears. There's no other way around it. Like, you're going to be bounced off your board. You're going to be dragged by your kite. You're going to drink salt water in the process. Lick your wounds and come back a different day. When I was in Brazil, actually, they had a mini, out of the spontaneous hurricane out of blue, and I found myself 20 feet above the water at one point, and was like, I was being teabagged essentially by the wind, and didn't know at the time that you should just launch it, but it was a new kite, and I was like, I'm not going to launch my kite, risk my life for my beautiful new kite, and which I won't do again. There is an emergency release that I learned later, but yeah, and I still saw it through. There's a huge, what do you call it? Like a secondhand market for kite gear, because someone would buy their old gear, get freaked out by some crazy fall like that, and want to sell it immediately. So any of you who want to find cheap kite surfing gear, you can probably find it on Craigslist somewhere.
Yeah, one thing Mike talked about, you got three languages. I'm a big believer in the rule of threes. Even on the cover of your book, you talk about, the three rules, the three things to follow. Is there something important to you about that rule of three?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Three feels like it's balanced, right? And it's easy to get your hands around. In this case, it's 3 easy steps, and it really comes down to getting that book. And that's like the heart of, your legacy thought leadership, getting the book done. And that's, at that point, you toast to yourself, you celebrate a little bit, you have a sigh of relief because your book is published. Hopefully with some bestseller categories too, which makes, something you have for the rest of your life. And then leveraging that through some marketing, content marketing and whatnot to expand your impact, and so that's the thing. And then the last one is that, once you've changed lives, then we create the ripple effect. So that's really strengthening your impact, your legacy, excuse me. So like really managing your legacy, if you would. So I think it's really enough, 3 easy steps and enough to make this a success. And so that's it. I couldn't come up with 7, to be honest.
No, that's fantastic. So when we look at this, where do I start? All right. You and I have talked actually, Pete, offline for quite a while. Like, I got a book. I don't know where my book is going to be. Where do I start?
Yeah. So the first step is to work on an outline, right? And I talk about that. I have, if anyone goes to my website, there's some free tools and tricks to do that, things you should consider for your outline. And once you have your outline, and just so you know, it's like kind of a skill of marketing. You tell them what you're going to tell them per chapter, you tell them again, and then you tell them what you told them. So each chapter should kind of follow that kind of modus operandi and then lead into the next chapter so they don't put the book down. And so that's kind of what I followed. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that'll give you an idea. So get your outline done and speak your book into existence. It's really getting over that imposter syndrome. And one thing you asked me before, like any advice for the C-level executives? We know there are bad managers and there are good managers. There are bad leaders and there are good leaders. I think like one of the ways people can get off the sidelines, do they want to be the ones to have an impact on the leaders of the future or the clown in the office next to them? And we all seen those clowns, right? Like, oh my God, I can't believe he's leading this team. I can't believe people are actually listening to him. It happens. And so if you want to, so it's better than to listen to you than someone else. Your stories are unique. Your style is unique. Your voice is unique. And by recording it, it actually comes out in your own voice. So one of the apps I love, and this isn't a plug I'm not even invested in them or anything else, but Otter AI, it understands me better than Siri does. And Siri and I have a love-hate relationship. She never really gets me, and vice versa. But Otter AI is amazing because you get the text and you get the audio from that as well. And it's really accurate. It's on your phone. So as soon as you're ready, as soon as you have that outline, it could be on your commute to work, be like just another person talking themselves on a New York subway, you'll look fine. You could be in your car ride home. You could be on your exercise bike, whatever you want. And you could be talking your book into existence. And so next steps is, it's not a plug. These are free gifts. Go to my website, figure out how to do your outline. There's some tricks for recording that, and you're ready to go, I think. But one of the first things I could recommend is remembering those conversations with someone on your team, the hundreds and conversations you've had throughout your career when people have come to you for advice. And that's going to probably feel very good when you realize that people do respect and value your message. And hopefully, someone here was listening when you're, someone in your audience will get their book done. And the 3 of us could feel amazing because we started creating that ripple effect, and they're going to start changing lives. And it may have started here. So that's something that's very comforting to me.
Pete, you've accomplished so much and you've experienced so much, traveling around the world as well, running with the bulls, kite surfing, everything that you've done. Who plays Pete Grimes in the Pete Grimes story?
Samuel L. Jackson. Oh, I don't know.
There's a lot of curse words then and there and all of that.
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wish it could be me. Hopefully I have to get my acting chops up to speed like you, Mike, and you can give me some pointers, and I could be my own actor in that movie. But yeah, I wish I could. I know you have a background in fine wine. I wish I could help you, but when I was drinking in the streets of Pamplona, it was out of a Boda bag, and I don't even know what I was drinking at one point. Half of it was all my T-shirt anyway at that point. So,
Oh, the best wine in the world is always the wine that is associated or connected to an experience. So that's
yeah,
great.
yeah, amen. That's true. Yeah, that's great. See, there you go, Mike. You have a book in you. Maybe that's your next book.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah. Last thing for you, Pete. I know you've got Legacy Keepers. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, JD. One of the ideas is that everybody has a story in them, so it doesn't make sense for me to say, it has to be a C-level executive. No, there's C-level author. So it's true, everyone has a story in them. So having said that, I started realizing that what I did with my dad is something that is very valuable for other people as well, that we have to get those stories out of our loved ones, whether it's your dad, your grandfather, your high school football coach, your minister, your doctor. Everyone's had a leader in their life, and I know we talked about thought leaders and that kind of makes me cringe, but really a leader is someone who's just impacted someone's life. It's changed their way of thinking. And that to me is a thought leader. This new idea I have then is to have family members interview their family or a loved one or a coach or the minister or their whoever and say, here, I'm going to follow this easy outline. I'm going to record you. We're going to get all your stories out. And the questions change from, an executive to a memoir, so to speak. But I think that especially now when we start talking about the amount of dementia happening and the lack of connection between generations, kids on their phones and not speaking to their grandfathers at Thanksgiving. I think that doing this exercise could be extremely valuable because first and foremost, you record these messages before they're lost, before it's too late. I mean, I wish there are a lot of people dealing with dementia, and maybe it's too late for them to remember some of these great stories they have. And then that whole family, future generations, are not going to benefit from knowing where in Ireland they came from, or where in China they came from, and how did they get here, how did they survive, and how did they build up the family base that they have today. I think those stories are very valuable as well. And so I have C-level executive. It's a legacy thought leader, C-level executive. And that's more of a white glove approach where I walk people through it. It's just one and done, do your interview and I take care of the rest. And then there's another one. It's like do it yourself where it leads people in. They could get the package, interview their own family members and get that book published. And I want to give another shout out to StoryCorps because I think it's a great organization. They have a big promotion that they do for Thanksgiving and where they want to create these conversations around the Thanksgiving table. And so the kids aren't on their phones or on TikTok or on, Tinder or whatever their distraction is at the time. And they're actually talking. More importantly, they're actually listening, right? And this is the really important thing. And and think about that. They could do that over Thanksgiving and have a great Christmas gift for the whole family, if they get their book done. And so that's something I'm kind of pushing right now. Have people have these conversations and learn to listen and learn to record these stories and learn to just value and respect their elders, because I think we don't see that enough. And we got to get these stories down before it's too late, while we can.
That's a great point, Pete. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on this inaugural C-Level Up. Perfect
Thanks,
guy to have on, the C-suite author to talk about C-leveling up. You can get more information at PeteGrimes.com. You can get his book on Amazon. I highly recommend it. It's a quick read, but it's going to get you on your path. Pete, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I actually reread my book, and sometimes, I'm sorry, there's another humble brag. Sometimes you're like, oh my God, that was terrible. I can't believe it. I actually enjoyed it. So hopefully others will enjoy it too. So pass the second round test. You guys, you're amazing. Thank you for allowing me to be your guinea pig, to kick off this amazing series you have. I know you're going to impact a lot of lives yourselves and, push the envelope for leaders out there. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thanks so much, Pete.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Pete. I wasn't wrong, Mike. Pete is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And this notion of everybody has a story. And as a C-level individual, you need to tell that story because people can learn from it. I thought it was a great message.
Pete's he's just such a good dude, first of all, just really warm and positive all around. And he's an author for authors that don't know that they're authors yet. And I think that is really inspiring, especially from someone like me that never thought I could ever write a book about anything. Uh, he just has such a positive, encouraging attitude towards taking a chance, recording yourself, recording your relatives, and telling your story.
Check out Pete's website. We'll put a link on it as well.
Also, I thought it was amazing to hear that this is a man that's run with the bulls multiple times. He's jumped out of planes, obviously the kite surfing. I don't know if I would do any of those things. I mean, like, I'm kind of afraid of the Trader Joe's parking lot. So the dude has courage, and he's got an inspiring message and a wonderful book. And it was such a pleasure to talk to him today.
And for a few years, we'd travel together to run events, and he'd be like, "Hey, gonna hit the gym." I'm like, "No, not with you, Pete," because he's extremely fit. And I tell you what, though, what a guy! And again, a big thank you to Pete for joining us. And this is a great start to our show. We're excited for everybody to join us every week. Sea Level Up is a production of James Duane Group, producers JD Miller and Mike Kreissl, edited by Nala B and Penny M. All depictions of persons living or dead are purely on purpose. All episodes will be on jamesduane.com. That's James Duane, DWAYNE.com, Podbean, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sea Level Up.